Today's headline is She Blames Murders on Broken Love, the Arsenic Annie story. So today we are looking at the real life case of a serial killer named Anna Marie Hahn. She poisoned 5 men between the ages of 67 and 78, and prior to poisoning them, she had all of them in their wills sign over their homes and money to her before they unfortunately died in her care. And this occurred in Cincinnati in the German region of the town from 1932 to 1937. Hello, I'm Angela, and I'm a history teacher / historian, and I like to use real life murder cases to help people better understand history. Oftentimes these cases reflect larger problems in society at the time. So today we are going to learn about the story of Arsenic Annie. And what's interesting is that all of this occurred during the Great Depression here in the United States, but specifically occurred in the German region of Cincinnati, which is known as over the Rhine. It's a place where a lot of German immigrants all settled, and at its height, it had 36,000 people. And this is the location where Anna was basically doing all of her killings. So Anna was born in Germany, and she had a pretty good lifestyle, a pretty good life in Germany until she was around 18, 19 years old. And that's when she met an older doctor, and she fell in love with this man. And he swept her off her feet, literally, and she ended up pregnant. So she goes to the doctor, she's 19, her boyfriend, and tells him, I'm pregnant and we need to get married. And he tells her, I can't marry you because I'm already married. And I also have some kids as well. So he goes back to his family, and her family is very upset with this situation. And so she ends up having a little boy named Oscar. As soon as he is born, her family ships her off, and they send her to the United States, where they have family in Cincinnati, Ohio. So she lives with her aunt and uncle, and she gets a job, and she's basically living her life. Then she meets a young man named Philip, who's also a German immigrant. So she and Philip ended up getting married, and because she now has structure in her life and she's met someone who's working, who's marrying her, her parents allow her son Oscar to move to the United States with her. So her husband is like a phone operator. She ends up opening her own bakery, and they have a good income. However, Anna doesn't like to work, and the bakery is a lot of work. She has to get up early in the morning. She has to come in. She has to start baking everything. She has to be prepared to open. She has to have everything done. So the job ends up being a lot harder than she's expecting, and she doesn't really like it. And at some point, there's a fire, and the fire damages not only the bakery, but evidently the bakery was connected to her home, and the fire also damaged that. And they did an investigation, and they found that the fire was done purposely, and that it was an arsenic attempt. But they had insurance. Insurance paid her to fix the bakery and the portion of the home that was burned. And she got $2,000. Now, $2,000 in today's money, that is the equivalent of $44,000 today. So she got $2,000 like that. And this appears to be her introduction to insurance and how great insurance could be, because she got $2,000. She no longer had to work in the bakery. She made a huge amount of money in a relatively short amount of time with absolutely no work. What ends up happening is shortly after she receives this payment from the insurance company over her bakery, she tries to convince her husband, Philip, that he needs life insurance, specifically $25,000 worth of life insurance. That is the equivalent to almost $500,000 today. So she asked him the first time. Philip said, no, we don't need that. I am healthy. I am young. And that's going to cost a lot of money to get that amount of insurance. So he says no. She tries a second time, brings him the paperwork. Please sign this paperwork so we can get you life insurance in case something happens to you. Me and my son will be okay. And Philip is like, no, I'm not going to sign that. She doesn't ask anymore, which If I was Philip, I would be a little concerned, but he just assumed she let it go. He's like, okay, she let it go. It's over. She's not going to ask me anymore about the insurance. Very soon after that, Philip starts getting sick, and he notices that he's getting sicker and sicker every day. And he gets to the point where he can barely get out of bed. And this whole time, his wife is taking care of him, and she's being loving and concerned. And he just keeps getting worse, and he can't figure out what happened, why, what's wrong with him. At some point, Philip was able to contact his mother, and his mother came to the house, saw the state that he was in, and said, "You're going to the doctor now." And Anna tried her best to stop him from going to the hospital. She kept saying, "I'm taking care of him. He's getting better. He's getting better." The mother was like, "No." The mother snatched Philip out of that bed, took him to the hospital. Sure enough, within a short amount of time, he started getting better, and he divorced her quicker than anything. He was like, "No, she did this." He suspected she did that to him, but he couldn't prove it. And it doesn't appear that he goes to the police or anything. I bet you anything, she forged his name on that insurance policy. So Philip divorces her. He gets out of that hospital bed. He goes and gets a divorce and says, "Stay away from me." So within a couple of days that Philip gets better and gets out of the hospital, Anna starts advertising in the newspaper as if she is a stay-at-home nurse. Like she is a nurse that will come and live with you and take care of you. Mind you, this girl has no medical background training. She ain't even took care of Philip properly, and Philip's half dead. She has no training whatsoever, but she starts advertising in all the local newspapers. But specifically, she only advertised in the historic German section of Cincinnati. So this is where, starting in the late 1800s, when Germans started coming over and they decided to come to Cincinnati, they all settled in this one location. It's called Over the Rhine. You have to cross over a bridge to get into it. So it was known as Over the Rhine, referencing to the Rhine River in Germany. And that's where they all settled. And you can see the architecture and everything. So as at its height, it had about 36,000 people living there, predominantly all German immigrants. But in the 1930s, as the Great Depression started, 28% of the residents in that area got out. They went out searching for jobs. They went to other parts of the city and things like that. The problem was that 28% was almost all young people. So you have an area where the majority of people in this area are now older, elderly people, and all the young people have left. And so what ends up happening is, as Anna is putting out her services, there's a lot of need because all the young people have left and a lot of older people are there by themselves and they need someone to come live with them. So as soon as she puts that advertisement in the newspaper, she starts getting everybody starts answering. And one particular man answered the advertisement. The first person to answer her advertisement was Ernest Koch, and he was in his 70s. And everyone who knew Ernest said that even though he was in his 70s, he was healthy as a horse. Like there's nothing wrong with him. He wanted Anna to move in with him so that she could help take care of the little things like cooking his meals, cleaning up after him. But overall, he didn't need her to do much of anything else. He could handle things himself. So that was what she was hired to do. And just to stay with him until he gets older and can no longer take care of himself. And then she would take care of him. This girl moves in. He starts getting sick. At some point, Anna convinces him to deed the home to her in his will. And right after that will was signed, he ends up dead. So Anna gets a home fully paid for. And not only is it fully paid for, it's several stories. And at the bottom, there is a doctor's office. And so the doctor actually rents from the home. So the home is not only paid for, it also provides Anna with an income every month. Now, Anna, because she owns the home, has keys to get into that doctor's office when it's closed. So she goes into the doctor's office and takes his prescription pads and that she can now write prescriptions on. Even though she now owns a home and has an income coming in. She once again advertises her services as a live-in nurse, and another man comes forward. His name is Albert Parker. Albert Parker did not have much money at all. He worked for the railroads for several years, saved up as much money as he could for his retirement, but his whole estate was valued at $1,000 in cash. That's it. So that would be the equivalent of $22,000 today. That's all the money this man had. Anna convinces him to allow her to borrow that money, and then she signed all this paperwork. She signed all this paperwork saying, I'm going to give you this money back. I promise. She signed the promissory note and everything. After she got that $1,000, that man died and that promissory note disappeared. We have the second person she has killed. She has now gotten the equivalent of $22,000 in cash from him. She also owns a home, and she also gets gets income from that home. And instead of stopping, she continues and puts her services back in the newspaper, and another man hires her. So the third person that hires her is Jacob Wagner. And what's interesting is this time, Anna started understanding, maybe I need to start creating, some type of backstory, so I don't just look like I'm just a random nurse that comes in and they just magically leave me all their money. When she moves in with him, begins to tell neighbors and just random people, I'm his niece. I'm his niece. Even though she is not related to this man, barely knows this man, she begins to tell everyone that that's her uncle. He's my uncle. So it comes to no surprise that shortly after she moves in, he starts getting sick. And in his will, he leaves Anna $17,000, which is the equivalent to $375,000 today. In modern day times, she would probably be worth around $500,000 in property and money that she has scammed out of these men. And that is in today's values. And we have a fourth. So she literally goes back to the newspaper and advertises her services again. This time, it is a man named George Selman. Magically starts getting sick, and then in his will, he gives Anna $15,000, which is in modern terms, over $300,000 today. Probably at this point has collected the equivalent of about $800,000 in a short amount of time from all of these men that she has killed so far in property and money. So we get to the fifth person, and this is where things start going kind of bad for her at this point. So the fifth guy, she once again advertises, and he's like, yes, I need help. Will you please help me? His name is George Obendoffer. So George needs to take a trip to Colorado. They're in Cincinnati, Ohio. He needs to take a trip to Colorado. So he, Anna, and her son Oscar take this trip to Colorado. Well, they get there. They check into a hotel, and magically, he dies. The police and everyone come. Anna says, oh my God, this random man that I don't know just died. And I just came by and saw that he was dead. And I started screaming. Police are like, you don't know who he is? She's like, no, me and my son are here on vacation. I was just walking by and saw this random man dead. So the police took her statement. They took her information. And then she goes about on her way. She then goes to the bank and tries to cash a check at the bank for $1,000 as the wife of George. The man, she literally just said she had no clue who he was. She tries to cash a check there saying that she's his wife. The bank was suspicious. The bank was like, this is a little sketchy. The bank finds this a little sketchy, and the bank says, no, we're not going to cash it. So Anna, in need of money, which I don't know why she's in need of money unless she just doesn't want to spend her own money, goes back to the hotel and steals $300 worth of jewelry from the hotel. Then walks down to a pawn shop with her son and attempts to sell the $300 in jewelry. And the pawn shop looks at her. This is a little sketchy. No. Well, at the same time this was occurring, the hotel finds out that $300 worth of jewelry is missing, and they contact the police. The police start going around to pawn shops to see if anyone is trying to sell this jewelry. And guess what? A pawn shop owner says, yes, a woman with a young son tried to come in and sell this jewelry. So, and then at the same time that was occurring, the bank also contacted the police and said some woman who says she's the wife also was trying to cash a check. Well, police asked, what does she look like? They gave a description. They said a young boy was with her. So then all of a sudden the police put two to two together. They bring her back in. But this time they question her son and they ask her son, do you know George? And the son said, yes. Me and my mother came from Cincinnati, Ohio with him to Colorado. And she gets arrested, but they let her go. I don't know if they let her go on bail or what, but they let her go. She goes back to Cincinnati, Ohio, and puts her services back in the newspaper again and gets someone else to actually hire her. So she finds another man whose also name is George Heiss. And she starts working for him and he starts getting sick. And he gets sick and he gets paralyzed. At one point, like half his body gets paralyzed and he's sick. And he's relying a lot on Anna. So one day, George is sitting at his chair and Anna's in the kitchen cooking and she brings him a beer. George is not really paying attention. He's just watching whatever he's watching. But then he notices that there's flies and a fly lands the mug of beer and the fly drinks it. And then the fly falls over dead on the table. So George calls Anna into the room and he said, I want to share this beer with you. Drink the beer. And Anna looked at him. She told him, oh, no, I can't drink it because it's for you. I don't drink beer. And he said, drink the beer. And she said, no. And that's when he knew she was trying to kill him. He ordered her out of his home. And then he called the police and told the police what had happened. And the police took the mug of beer. They analyzed it. And sure enough, it had poison in it. And this triggers off the investigation of all the other men who have died in Anna's care. It was perhaps one of the most open and shut cases I've ever seen, because as soon as the investigation starts, it becomes apparent that this woman did not try to hide anything. They go to her home. They find the prescription pad. They find the bottles of medication, the lethal medications. And then they exhume the bodies. And sure enough, all the men died of poison. So they had literally the weapon, which was the poison, the bottle. She never disposed of anything. She kept everything. They had the prescription pad. They had everything against Anna. Now, one of the things that I was looking for, that I was really trying to understand with this case, was what was her motive? Because as I said from previous times, every single step of the way, she seems to have secured the bag. She secured enough money to not need to kill anymore, but she continued to do it. So one of the newspapers said that it was most likely due to her having some type of gambling issue or gambling problem that was referenced, but that was only one newspaper. And when they referenced it, it really, it was just very vague. It was like to support her gambling issue, but it doesn't really give any detail. And like I said, it was only that one newspaper who said it. I honestly think her motive was she didn't want to work. She wanted to have a great lifestyle because, you know, she did disappoint her parents getting pregnant out of wedlock, and she thought she was going to marry a doctor and live this great life, and it didn't happen. And for her to be shipped off, and now magically she starts making all this money. She has this great and glamorous lifestyle. I honestly think she did it for money. She did it to kind of show off and show her parents how great her life had become. And she didn't like to work. It was quick and easy money. I think the trigger was when she got that insurance money for that home arsenic issue. I think that triggered in her like, oh, I can get all of this money and not do any work. And I think at the bottom of everything, the core reason was money and how easy and fast it was to get that money. And she really didn't care. Okay, so the investigation, they got plenty of evidence against her. So at trial, her defense was that it was mercy killings, that all of these men were older, they were dying, and she just basically didn't want them to suffer. So that's why she gave them lethal injections of medication and things like that. Problem is, of course, is that the prosecutors brought witness after witness after witness that said, even though these men were older, they were actually in great health. They were healthy men. And it wasn't until Anna came into their life that they started to decline. So overall, it wasn't a very good defense. But here's the interesting part. Despite her defense being very weak, Anna never thought that she was going to be found guilty. So throughout her trial, she was positive. She invited reporters into her cell to talk to them. And they were like, you're facing like the death penalty, right? And she was like, she just wasn't very like upset or scared whatsoever for what she was facing. And I think the reason is that Cincinnati, Ohio in general, had never put to death a woman before, ever in its long history. Even women who have done super bad things, serial killers and stuff like that, they never gave them the death penalty. So you can kind of see why Anna was so like, they're not going to give me the death penalty. I know I'm going to get time. It's just, so you can imagine her shock as she's sitting there and the judge tells her punishment, which is death in the electric chair. And she was shocked. She was shocked that they came back with death. So the day that she was to be executed, I think maybe the day or the day before she was executed, she did write a letter stating kind of her background and why she did it. So this is what she said in the letter. Only God knows why. That was it. She was like, I don't know why I did it. Only God knows why. And when I get to heaven, maybe God will explain it to me because I don't know why I killed all those men. That was her explanation. Only God knows why. It was a super long letter and the newspaper printed it. It printed it word for word, even the misspellings and things like that. But essentially she said, only God knows why. And I will find out when I get to heaven, when God tells me this is why you did it. One of the interesting things is she addresses the killings at the beginning with just basically saying only God knows why I did it. Then she gets into this long explanation about what happened between her and her baby daddy. And essentially she blames him for all of this happening. She's like, he broke my heart. I was in love with him. He was married. And that's kind of what messed me up, was because my baby daddy made me fall in love with him and left me with the child and ruined my reputation and mentally messed me up. So that was her explanation. That was the letter. It was a really long letter, but I would say 2/3 of it was just basically talking about the father of her child and how he messed her up and destroyed her life. So the day of the execution, she did not hold it together. She was not calm. And as they were putting her in the chair, she did say, why are you doing this? Please don't do this. Don't do this to me. Stop. And they went ahead and electrocuted her and she died. So she was executed in 1938 and she became the first woman in Ohio to receive the death penalty using the electric chair. Her case is interesting because she only focused on the German part of Ohio. She never actually tried to advertise her business anywhere else. And I think it's one of those things where when you have these ethnic enclaves, these ethnic groups that are living in one area, they can also be preyed upon by people who are also the same ethnic group as them. And I think a lot of times they might be a little bit more trusting of people of the same ethnic group. And that's probably why she decided to focus on that group specifically. That's all for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm Angela, and thanks for watching. Ciao, everyone.